3, 2, 1. You are listening to the History and Music Podcast. We come to you from the tail of a great comet. Congratulations. Kick back, enjoy some cookies, drink some Kool-Aid. I am your host, Fee, and I'm joined by Foe and Fum. Buckle up, lace up your Nikes, and get ready for the ride. All right. No, not really. I'm Scott, and I'm joined by Sean and Giordano. How's it going, guys?
I'm good. I'm actually behind Halley's Comet, though. Are we on Hale-Bopp? That's my bad. Typo.
You caught the wrong comment.
Got the wrong comment. Dang, I'm the wrong spaceship. So,
but yeah, Sean and I are privileged to introduce the man in the third chair here, Mr. Giordano, of Mambo Wizard fame. He's a very special guest here, so everyone give him a warm welcome.
Hello.
Hey,
welcome.
How's it
Happy
going?
to be here. Happy to join you tonight on The Craft and be a crew member with you in this great voyage of life.
Hopefully we can leave our bodily containers behind and ascend to the next level.
Yeah. The next evolutionary level above human.
I'm glad you caught that. We'll talk about that later in the show.
Yeah, but this will all make sense in about 20 minutes. I don't know.
I mean, maybe kind of.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll keep that just for us. That's just for us.
It can. Mm-hmm.
That's just for us. Giordano, welcome, man. So we're glad to have you on the show. You picked the song for tonight's episode, and so you're it, man. You're in the hot seat. So just for those that don't already know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello. My name is Giordano. I am a Twitter micro niche celebrity. No, just kidding.
It's actually true.
Yeah, I'm just a random guy. I am broadcasting live from Montana right now, in the middle of nowhere in Montana. But a little bit about myself. My name is actually Giordano. I go after the Giordano Bruno. I thought I would try to be kind of cheeky or cute by making my sort of half anonymous screen name on Twitter be Giordano Lives. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to use my real name. No one knows that that's my actual real name. And then it turns out that 50 other guys had kind of the same idea to use the philosopher Giordano Bruno. So, but that is actually, I am the real Giordano. So this is like the real original one.
Well, I'm glad we're catching Giordano Bruno in his happy arc.
Yeah. Yeah, this is like this is like the ending that they didn't want you to know about. So, and actually, oh wow, this is actually getting kind of cool because Giordano Bruno talking about aliens and stuff, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway,
we've reached new levels of esoterica we didn't think were possible.
Yeah, I mean, this is just like wow. So anyway, my name is Giordano. I just a little bit about me. I was born in California to an American father and an Italian mother. My father actually met my mother in Italy. She was born and raised there when he was serving as a missionary there. He was a missionary to southern Italy, and he met her there in the late 70s. And I believe this, as the story goes, as part of my family lore, is that she went up to him and saw him at church, went up to him and said something like, I received some revelation or something that I know that we're meant to be together. I'm supposed to marry you. And so then my dad put in, okay, I need to be transferred out of here as quickly as possible. And was transferred to the other side of the mission. And then, but 2 years later went back and married her. And then they had me, and I actually spent my first years in California and grew up there, and then moved out to Montana. And I'm actually an English teacher for high school, and I also published my first great classic novel, great American novel, The Mambo Wizard, Breakfast is Served. So
the first of many, right? It's book one of a 12-part series.
Oh yes, it's going to make like Robert Jordan Wheel of Time look like the Cat in the Hat.
Yeah. Okay, Brandon Sanderson, eat your heart out.
Yeah, exactly.
Come at me.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I think it was recently listed as number 370 in the top young adult sci-fi novels that feature aliens on Amazon. Okay, the number one in that is Ender's Game.
But who's counting, right?
coming for you, Orson Scott Card. So
It's coming for your title.
yeah.
But you're number one in wizards that perform breakfast magic, though. I think.
Yeah,
Aren't you?
actually, yeah, it's actually a micro category. Number one in young adult novels about breakfast magic and orphaned wizards who make friends with cat aliens.
So it's doing some numbers.
So I bought the book. I have it with me, but I've yet to crack it open. So you're intriguing me with all of these.
Well, I mean, if that doesn't get you, I feel like the big barrier to entry was me naming it the Mambo Wizard Breakfast is Served. I feel like if you can overcome that hurdle, you're good.
So your publicist was okay with that title?
Oh yes, they highly encouraged it. Yeah.
So, well, we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But so cool, man. Well, it's good to have you on the show. Now, as far as like musically, what's your musical genre of choice or genres?
I grew up loving music. It's hard, and I was thinking about this when you had first posed the question. It's such a hard question to answer, and I know it's like the most cliched thing in the world to say, oh, I listen to a little bit of everything. Because I remember growing up, people would always say that, and then you would ask them, oh, okay, so like you listen to a little bit of everything. So, okay, so you're into Husker Du or I don't know, like the Scorpions and I don't know, like I would just name off, and like I know that they would not actually into a little bit of everything, but I actually really think that I am. Although my first love of my youth would probably be what we would call classic rock or classic rock radio, dad rock, all of that 70s and 80s rock. My father, when I was growing up, he did the Columbia House CD. You get like a CD every month from their membership.
My mom did that too. BMG would do that. They had a little catalog. Yep.
And you get the first 12 for 1 penny. And he would do that, and then I think oftentimes he would tell me like he would forget to even order one, so they would just send you one randomly based on what they think you would like. And he didn't even like these albums, but I think I would just collect everything, like every old classic rock album. I loved all that stuff, and so that was my first love. But
I feel like my like the chances of that, like of a good result from that, would be bad. Like for me, would not be like likely. I'd be getting CDs like KD Lang. I don't even who's this. I'm not gonna listen to that.
Yeah. I wonder what algorithm they're using there. Are they using like Pandora's pre-algorithm?
It's gotta be whatever CD they're trying to dump. Oh, we got a bunch of CDs of Led Zeppelin, whatever, and just send it to you.
Yeah, I remember what was one. It was like one because like my dad, he would get all of the greatest hits compilations. So we had like the Queen and Led Zeppelin and I don't know, Black Sabbath and stuff like that. And then one day he got in the mail Jimmy Buffett, like the Jimmy Buffett's greatest hits. And he was like, I don't even know, I don't care about this, don't want this. But I actually listened to it, although I actually didn't really care for it either. But
not a fan of Margarita.
I gave it a shot. Yeah. So
that's cool, man.
Yeah.
And I heard that sometimes you that you moonlight as a radio DJ.
Oh yeah. Well, for a long time I would do this little station in town, like a public radio station, and then they would have like volunteers and people come on and do their own shows. And so for years I did a show called Middle Earth Radio, and it would just be me coming on and playing my just weirdest, just whatever I felt like, playlists of bizarre stuff, and then talking to whoever.
Blowing all the normies' minds with your crazy playlists.
Right. I like to imagine, because the signal carries out pretty far because there's not a lot of interference out where I'm at. And so you could be like on the interstate in the middle of nowhere, just driving through Montana, and you could, perhaps pick it up. And, that was like my fantasy, that I was broadcasting out to the stars and to the middle of nowhere. And, there you guys can enjoy some deep cuts of They Might Be Giants or something.
Every song they've written is deep cuts except for Constantinople.
Yeah, true.
No one knows any other songs by them. Maybe they do, but they seem to have a very dedicated fan base. I've noticed. They Might Be Giants.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true.
But what's funny is the person you're describing, Giordano, sounds like like the radio folks, especially on the local radio, is like it's basically a competition for who's the most pretentious about what they listen to. And it's like, oh, I listen to music that doesn't even exist yet, and that's always the running joke. And it's like, you know what? I'll be honest, man, this isn't even good. It's just nobody's heard of it.
There's a reason why. There's a reason why that no one's heard of this. I don't know what it is with like pretentious music people or even audiophiles. There's a subgroup of them. I don't see them as much these days, but like back in the days, in the era of Pitchfork, if you're familiar with like Pitchfork music online, where like the low quality of the recording, it was a feature, and they loved like just things that were crappily recorded or things that sounded terrible, and that just made it more authentic, and they love that stuff.
I know you're talking about. Well, they call it lo-fi now. Like you can actually do that nowadays. Like in the modern era, they're like recording stuff like with just crappy equipment on purpose to kind of get that unpolished sound. But I know what you're talking about. 'Cause I remember in high school there was this girl I was kind of dating, and she really liked New Found Glory, which we talk about them like every episode. So they're not even like a small band at all. But back then they kind of were. And I remember her saying like she hated when they got popular, when they signed onto a major record label, because their sound was so much more polished. Yeah. And so she'd go back and listen to like these like deep tracks they put out on like some compilation CD, and it's like, see, you can tell. Look, his voice is like cracking because he hasn't been doing vocal warm ups, and like the guitars are like a lot more sloppy. I'm like, it's just crappier music. What's the point of this?
You can pretend you're there or something.
Yeah, sure. Man. Whatever.
Yeah. But no, I get it. I get that feeling. Because I do the same thing with the other band we always bring up, Blink-182, and Less Than Jake. Like their older stuff, like because especially with punk, I think it fits the genre better to be a little more grungy that way.
Just a little rough around the edges, yeah.
More raw.
Yeah, raw for sure.
Very
for sure.
True.
We're gonna get Adam Eberts on here because he's supposedly the punk rock master, and he's always judging us on the music we're using, or singing, but. I don't know. We've called him out enough on this podcast. I don't think he listens to us, so he'll never hear this. But
he did join the Bob the Duck chat though, so we can force him to listen to the songs we want him to listen to.
Yes.
And then hear his ridicule. Well, that's awesome. And so, Giordano, I did have a question I was going to ask before the show, but so you mentioned that your dad served in Italy, your mom's Italian. Did you grow up speaking Italian?
Actually, yes, I did. In my home, we were bilingual. We spoke Italian and English. I mean, mostly out of necessity. My mom didn't even know English. I was like their honeymoon baby. I was born like right after, and my mom just was new to the States, and she learned English with me. So they always spoke Italian together. We spoke Italian in the home for a long time. It kind of eventually did drop off, and she kind of embraced more English. Although now in their older age, they've gone back to speaking a lot more Italian. So yeah, I can watch Italian movies without the subtitles. And people think that's really cool.
That is cool. It's cool because
it was a cool thing for girls too, like in dating and stuff. Yeah, they love it.
In Italian, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because it's a bilingual language that not everyone is bilingual in. Because in the U.S., like everyone and their mom speaks Spanish, but how many people do you know that speak like actual straight up Italian? Not very many anymore. Maybe in like the 20s in New York, but not anymore.
Yeah.
Definitely not out west. Maybe
definitely not in Montana.
No, in Montana, no, it's not it's like a rare thing. I mean, yeah, we don't really, and out here, everyone, my mom was always annoyed by this, but everyone's always pronounces it Italian. It's like, oh, you're a real Italian. You speak Italian out here. And my mother's like, it's Italian. It's not. Italiano. I'm not from Italy. That's what she'd always say.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, with an Italians, and I think this is a part of the heritage, because I think Italians love that 80s synth sound. Like the Italians love that stuff. Like if you ever when I was a kid, I would listen to like the Queen, and I noticed that, and this is not just Queen, a lot of bands did this. A lot of those 70s rock bands, when they got into the 80s, they started adding all these synthesizer noises and sounds and stuff. And I think a lot of like the true rock fans were turned off by the sound, and they're like, no, we want real rock, we want real music. But like Europeans and like Germans and Italians, like they love all that like really cheesy stuff.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
just how they are. Yeah.
So
that's
it's
part
in your
of me.
blood.
Yeah.
It's in your blood, man. Can't get away
Yeah.
from it. That's awesome. So I was
Yeah.
going to ask as well. So you mentioned your dad served. Where did your dad serve in Italy? Can you disclose that without dad mission doxing?
Yeah, he served in Catania. It was the Italy Catania mission, although that I do not believe that mission exists anymore. And that would be like the southern tip of the boot, and like the heel of the boot, and Sicily.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. I had a friend from high school that served in Milan, and when
Oh.
he came back, I just remember like not only did he speak Italian, but all of a sudden he got like way into fashion. Like he was just like dressing up every chance he got, wearing a suit to work when you didn't need to wear a suit to work. He was just all about fashion after that.
It's always the super tight suits, the
Yeah.
shoes with the pointy toes and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Talking with his hands a lot.
Yeah.
I was going to say drinking little cappuccinos, but he wouldn't do that. So
Yeah. Well, he
yeah.
might now. He left the church. He might now. So, but I don't know.
Oh. Thanks a lot, Milan.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot,
geez.
fashion industry.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, hey, it's good to have you on here, man. Thanks for agreeing to come on the show. And like we were saying earlier, Scott may not be a fan of this type of music. I am unironically a fan, and I know my wife is as well because we like new wave and definitely Depeche Mode vibes with this song.
Yes. Yes.
So the song is "Dot in the Sky" by Drab Majesty, and as I usually do, I did a little bit of research on the actual band itself. But before we get there, Giordano, why don't you kind of give us just a brief like rundown of how you encountered this song? You've been listening to these guys for a while, or what's your history personally with this song? And
it's like most music that I mean, a big chunk of my musical collection, I just found them from I observed their album cover for The Demonstration is the name of the album. And I saw the album cover online, and I just sort of it always piques my interest, interesting album covers. And I love album art and all that stuff. And so I saw the album cover. I'm like, this looks weird. This looks interesting. What is this? And I think we probably looked it up on YouTube or something. And I was just like instantly blown away. Just like, whoa, this is so cool. And it was just, I love all that new wave stuff. I love The Cure, Depeche Mode, and Erasure, and New Order, and all that kind of stuff. Like, I love the Cars. I love all that stuff. And so when I heard it, I was blown away. And then, as I think you had mentioned, without actually knowing what the topic of the music is, you wouldn't necessarily guess, oh, this is a concept album about a cult. But then when I kind of, what was it that I heard that made me, there was a song later on the album that says a line that that tripped me up, that tipped me off, that this is about the Heaven's Gate cult. And I remember the Heaven's Gate cult from years before. And I kind of have, and I can share this a little bit later too, but I kind of had like a mental history with them. And so then I loved it even more. So I just really like the album. It's relatively new. I don't remember what year it came out.
2017 looks like.
Okay, 2017.
Actually, January 20th of 2017. So we're coming up on the anniversary of this.
All right.
album.
So yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So like for me, like once you get a certain age, things that are like 5-6 years old are still like new, quote unquote. And I remember like when I was a teenager, something from 5 or 6 years prior was ancient. But now this is still like, yeah, it could be 10 years old. Like, oh yeah, it's that new album. So yeah, that's kind of how I found it.
Yeah,
I think that's probably the best way to find out that it's a concept album too, is because if you go into it knowing, kind of like how Sean and I can't speak for Sean, but definitely for me, how you suggested it, I knew kind of going in what was going to happen. But from your perspective, that I think it's a great way to kind of make it mean more, or like imprint more on you, because you like the music first, and then oh snap, this is like, then you revisit the song multiple times to try and figure out what all the things mean. So yeah. That's kind of what this podcast is all about. So it fits perfectly. That's all.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting too, because like the the band, like, again, Drab Majesty is the name of the band, and it's actually just kind of one guy. Well, technically two guys, but basically just one guy. And the guy is I forgot his name. Andrew Klinko. It's Andrew Klinko is his name. He's from Los Angeles, and he's actually a drummer of another band. They're kind of like an experimental kind of prog rock type of band called Marriages. And he was the drummer for that band. And then all of a sudden, he starts like teaching himself to play guitar, teaching himself to do synth stuff. And he started writing all these songs that didn't sound like songs for his other band. So he kind of took on this moniker of this androgynous, like man-woman thing, and he gave himself the name Deb Demure and started this band called Drab Majesty, which I think is way more popular than his actual original band now. They got way more plays on Spotify, I believe. So he starts releasing all these songs and like this kind of new synthwave type of stuff. And then he brought on another guy to play keyboards who calls himself Mona D. And so they both have these like kind of androgynous, neither man nor woman type personas, and they wear a lot of like the makeup and the wigs and the kind of the whole getup when they do their shows. But so this album that this is from is called The Demonstration, and it's a concept album, like we were all saying. And the concept album is quite literally about like the Heaven's Gate thing. And I'm assuming most of our listeners will know what Heaven's Gate is. If not, you will hopefully by the end of this show. But this song, Dot in the Sky, is technically the first song from the album. There's a little intro and then it goes into this, but this is the first song from that album. So it kind of sets the stage for the rest of the album and the rest of this concept thing this guy's doing. And I guess his idea is he likes writing synthwave stuff about sad, depressing things. And so he calls it tragic wave. That's what he refers to his music as. That's his genre. But yeah, I had never heard of this guy before or Drab Majesty at all. But I'm definitely like, it's doing it for me when I'm listening to it, as far as like the style of the sound. And when you listen to the words, we were talking about this earlier, when you listen to the words, you wouldn't know what this was about unless you knew that this was a concept about Heaven's Gate. Then it's like, oh, okay, that line means this. That line it makes sense now. But if I just heard it, it's like, oh, that sounds kind of ethereal and artistic, but you wouldn't peg it to anything specific. But other than that, we've been chatting for a while here doing intros and stuff. Should we kind of get into the lyrics, or do we need to do any kind of background on Heaven's Gate so some of this stuff makes sense? What do you guys think?
Yeah, because we were kind of talking before, the lyrics, while there are a lot of them, they're not super like direct or like
Specific.
Specific. It's more artistic, and so it's kind of hard to pull a lot out of them. So yeah, we can let's do a little primer on what Heaven's Gate is. Yeah. Let's do that.
I think that'll be good because the first song is about the beginning of Heaven's Gate anyway. It's not about the beginning of Heaven's Gate. It's about the beginning of the end of Heaven's Gate. But basically, and I can share a little bit about the comet Hale-Bopp, which is the comet Hale-Bopp. And I didn't do a ton of research about this. I'm mostly pulling from my own personal history of like my memories of it. I heard about this comet when I was, I think, 15 or 16. We heard about it on the news that it was approaching the Earth, and this was supposedly this huge comet the size of Texas or bigger or something like that was discovered by two astronomers on the same day, Alan Hale and Thomas Bopp. And
like separately though, right? They weren't working together, I don't think.
No, they were not. No, it was just like coincidentally they both discovered it on the same day and called it in or something like that. So they shared the name. And Alan Hale, also the name of the actor from the Gilligan's Island, but not
different guy though.
But not that guy. So they called it in. They named it Hale-Bopp, and then it passed by the Earth, as I recall, in the early winter months of 1997. And I recall being in Montana. I had moved from California relatively recently at that time in 1997. I mean, it was 4 years prior, whatever. But I remember the one thing about Montana moving there was they called it Big Sky Country. And the skies compared to California really did seem immense and majestic. And there wasn't as much light pollution. There wasn't as much, obviously, buildings or anything in the way. And so you could really see the stars at night, and you could really see the sky really beautifully. And I think from what I've read that Hale-Bopp could be seen particularly well from where we were at. I don't know, from our latitude or is it longitude? I don't remember. From where we're at in Montana. So it was passing by the Earth. We saw it up in the sky, and then immediately soon after that, or because it hung in the sky for actually months, I think, but it was extremely visible for at least a week or so, as I recall, and you would see it up there at night. And then one day on the news, they reported that a bunch of people in California, 39 people, had committed suicide because of the passing of this comet, allegedly. And they said, there was all these like reports and stuff about these people that had committed suicide, and they committed suicide because they thought that there was aliens that had come to pick up their spirits and take them aboard their UFO that was flying behind the comet. And I just remember, like, I was so blown away by this story. Like, 16-year-old Giordano, this was extremely captivating to me, this whole entire thing, because I liked sci-fi and I liked all this weird stuff, and I was interested in cults generally. So yeah, the whole thing blew me away. And so Dot in the Sky, as the song starts off and as the album starts off, it's just describing the appearance of this dot in the sky, of this comet in the sky, but also the dot, I think, is making a reference to, in forums and like in Usenet groups on the early internet in 1997, people had pointed out that there was like a dot that could be seen in the comet's tail, and people were speculating that it was a UFO. So I think that also might be kind of a veiled reference to the dot in the sky.
Right.
Right, that was kind of a lot, but that was like doesn't really explain anything about Heaven's Gate as a cult, but that's kind of what the beginning of the song.
Yeah, you spoiled a little bit the story of Heaven's Gate, but that's fine.
Spoiler alert: everybody dies.
They die.
All right, let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
No, the story starts like 20 years before, in the 70s when the cult started.
Yeah, well, what's crazy is I didn't actually know this until researching for this show, but Comet Hale-Bopp, they're not even, I thought they were scientists. They're like amateur scientists that just discovered it like in their backyards with their little, telescopes when they discovered it. And it was discovered in 95, which is just 2 years prior to this happening. But I guess for 97, that was like the brightest object in the sky other than the sun for that year. So like in 97, it was a very momentous thing, like this massive, beautiful, bright comet going through the sky that almost anyone could see for, a period of time. And I don't even know if it's going to make another trip around or not.
No,
it might have been just
I recall,
done, right?
They said when I was a teenager that was it. Like, it was coming around the Earth once every 7,000 years or something. Like, it was, I remember, at least, who knows if this is even accurate, but I just remember them saying it would be literally thousands of years before it passed close to us again.
Yeah, well, the Marshall Applewhite will probably be with it next time it comes by.
Right.
Or there'll be a new iteration or a new reincarnation of
of the alien that was controlling Marshall Applewhite's body.
Right. Yeah, alien, sure.
Dude, their mental gymnastics and the way they convince people is like kind of ingenious. Cults have been doing this type of thing forever. Cult leaders have been using this type of stuff, but he obviously, I don't know if he believed it, but we can get into it.
Mm-hmm.
So should we kind of expound a little bit more on Heaven's Gate itself?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, because I went down a bit of a rabbit hole on this.
There's another podcast that's like 8 episodes long. I'm like 4 or 5 into it. It's really interesting. But anyway.
Just about Heaven's Gate.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
What I know about Heaven's Gate is I read a book about them by Benjamin Zeller, I believe his name was.
He's quoted a lot about these guys because he's done like extensive research on them. Yes.
I read his book. I did not think it was that great of a book, to be honest. I kind of thought it sucked, but he had. Because all I wanted to learn about was Heaven's Gate, and Benjamin Zeller keeps going off on trying to classify them as a religion or a cult or a new religious movement, and I honestly, I don't care.
He's more of an academic. It sounds like he's
right. I just want to know like the details of what happened. I don't care about how you classify it. It doesn't matter to me at all. Anyway, from what I was reading in the book and just like memories of stuff, and reading the awesome Wikipedia page on it. We have those two, Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, and they were two sort of new age interested people in the 1970s. They met each other. There's a lot of ambiguity over exactly how they did meet, because I mean, we honestly don't know, because we just have the words of them, and they kind of had different stories on how they met. But they supposedly met in a hospital. They became platonic friends, and I believe that Bonnie told Marshall that she was she married?
Yeah, she was married with kids.
She had children. Okay. That she told him that their meeting had been foretold by extraterrestrials, like that aliens had foretold their meeting, and that they were like meant to meet each other.
Yeah, she was really into reading star charts for people and stuff, and she read his, and she said his was like really wild and like unique, and it said that they were meant to do something big together or something. And they both came from kind of failed marriages. So,
and they're both Texans as well.
Yeah.
Oh. And the big thing that they like initially their beliefs coalesced around was the prophecy given in the book of Revelation about the two elders who would be killed on the streets and then resurrected 3 days later, and that Marshall and Bonnie basically thought that this was referring to them, that this was their destiny.
Yep.
And that this was like going to be something that happened to them, but that they'd be taken up by extraterrestrials after they were killed, and that they called this the demonstration.
And they actually referred to themselves as the two, referring to.
Oh, that's right, as the two. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, well, they kind of went through a series of nicknames they'd call each other, but yeah, that's exactly right. And Bonnie Nettles is interesting because she's like a nurse. She's like grew up Baptist, but she's really like studying theosophy or whatever that is, and she's really into that. And somehow in a hospital, we don't know how, she meets this guy named Marshall Applewhite, who himself is also like a Christian of sorts that grew up in Texas, who also had a failed marriage. He was married, had 2 kids. And he actually had, I believe, a degree in music or in theater or something like that. So he actually did have some education, but he kept getting fired from jobs because he kept having affairs with his male students. And then he came out to his parents and told them that he was gay. His dad rejected him. And that sort of like sets the stage for him meeting Bonnie Nettles. They don't have any kind of relationship. Apparently it's 100% platonic, but they do love each other. It's just kind of this sort of nebulous, weird relationship they have. She leaves her husband, he leaves his wife, and they basically live together, kind of begging for change, traveling the United States, like giving presentations on whatever their religious fancy was at the time, whatever interpretation they had from the Book of Revelation for that day. And they'd have like a couple converts here or there. People would like leave and sell all their stuff and follow them, then regret it and then leave. And so they kind of had this movement. And this all started like in the early to mid 70s that they were doing this, and they basically kind of just lived as basically hobos, kind of like traveling hobos.
And I think in the 70s in particular, this was, I mean, probably not common, but a little more common than it would be today, right? To live the hippie life and just leave, travel.
Yeah, that's what I in the book they talked about Walter Cronkite doing a story that brought a lot of attention to them, because they were doing a story on like all of a sudden there was like, I don't know, 60 missing people out west who nobody knew what happened to these people. And it was just people who just packed up and left to either join this particular new age movement or hippie movement. And they just, like you said, they just sort of traveled around the Western United States camping, having like these new age sort of Christian revival meetings where they would just talk about just all sorts of new age stuff like astral travel and aliens, UFOs, and interpretations of the Book of Revelation and stuff like that. And one of the fascinating things in the book that I loved was the guy was analyzing like the two would go to a town, try to recruit people. A lot of times it had very little to no success actually recruiting anyone. But then when they did recruit people, they would go to like a new town, but not keep in touch with the people that they recruited. And this is like the 70s. So you had no internet, you had just like payphones. And so they would take out ads in local newspapers to let their followers know where they were off to next. And that would be it. Like they would have like a one ad in one paper for one day. And if you missed it, then you were on your own and you had to just sort of like continue the group by yourself. And
That's
then
wild.
it was just like crazy. And then there were people like living in the woods and like in campsites trying to start this movement. But they also forgot that you can't really do that without any sort of communication. But it also seemed like they didn't care. That wasn't really their thing either.
They saw themselves as like Jesus, basically, like come follow me type thing, and leave all your belongings, your life, everything, your money, family, everything, leave and come with us. And they thought that that's was how Jesus did it, and so that's how they were going to do it.
Well, I think he claimed later, Marshall Applewhite did, because Marshall Applewhite was kind of the one that sort of took Heaven's Gate and ran with it. And we'll find out why in a minute. But he later on in life, he basically talked about how Jesus was a real being that lived here on earth, but he was actually like an interdimensional being or an alien. And so now once Jesus died, the spirit of that alien left its bodily container or whatever, and it's now possessing the body of Marshall Applewhite. And so he's basically like a reincarnation of sorts of Jesus, essentially.
Right. And,
but he wouldn't call himself Jesus.
It's interesting because Bonnie, she eventually dies. And so their whole revelation thing kind of fell apart. And so he had to kind of adjust the doctrine of their cult to fit her untimely passing of cancer. And so he almost elevated her to like a heavenly father thing while he was Jesus.
Yeah, he started referring to her as a man with like male pronouns, like after she died.
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. She died in like 85, like 1985, I think.
Because in their whole view on things, like anything humanly, including sex, is below the next level that they were trying to get to. And so like they would refer to their bodies as vehicles and stuff like that. So it's like, so sex, gender, like everything human is like, it should be shed. And so that's what they were doing for the 20 years is perfecting trying to shed any human emotions, attachments,
almost like a monastic lifestyle, like very Gnostic, kind of very just like we're shedding all passions, all loves, all thoughts and feeling, everything, and even starting to look alike. So they'd cut their hair to look very androgynous. They'd wear kind of shapeless, baggy clothes on purpose to kind of be androgynous. And during this time, they're kind of traveling around. They'd get a bunch of followers. The followers would all leave, and then like it was just very. It was almost like kind of haphazardly, shoddily done. And I think it's because these people had probably something they probably had some sort of something they were dealing with mentally, some kind of mental issue they're trying to overcome that was never diagnosed. But the name of their group changed several times during this period. It started out as like Human Individual Metamorphosis, and then it was Total Overcomers Anonymous, and then it was some other thing. And so eventually in like the early to mid 90s is when they settled on Heaven's Gate. And that's when they started a website for Heaven's Gate, which is still online. You can still go to it right now. And it looks the same as it did in 95.
It's amazing.
Time capsule. It looks awesome. Yeah. One thing I will say, I don't know who they got to make their logo for Heaven's Gate. It is like an amazing, I love that logo. The Heaven's Gate logo is fire. And
would you have been a gator, Heaven's Gator?
I feel like I would have been one of those who definitely would have showed up, and then like for the pizza or whatever, and then
for the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, for some free Kool-Aid. But then the thing that I didn't get about it, and this obviously explains it. When I was in high school, I remember we read a book called "A Day No Pigs Would Die," and it was a novel about the Shakers, or like some of the last Shakers in America, of the Shaker religion. And I don't know if this is Shakers or Quakers, but there was a religious movement where like they also forbid sex, or all the members of the movement had to have a vow of celibacy. I guess it couldn't have been the Shakers because the novel was about a family. But
yeah, it was Quakers. There's a certain sect of Quakers, that believe that.
And so, like, well, yeah, I guess the religious movement's going to die out if you can't reproduce. Okay, it's going to be really hard to keep that going by just having. And this is the same exact problem that Heaven's Gate, I think, kind of had, which is, okay, you're going to overcome everything earthly, like everything. And we're talking like you can't eat even entertainment, and you can't be enjoying food. You can't be enjoying even idle conversation was a thing that you have to overcome. So you're not really enjoying food. You're not doing drugs, because a lot of times you associate cults with like sex or drug usage or something. I don't know, but there wasn't doing anything. So like, what are you doing all day in this? And so I'm guessing it's going to be really hard to keep people interested
There
for years.
were a few of them that did.
There were a few
that stayed with them all 20 years, like did the whole thing from the beginning.
Yeah. Which is why I think it's really such a fascinating thing. Like these are these 20 or 30 people who did this for so long.
Yeah, I have a couple theories about these guys. One of them is that him being like a closeted gay but deeply religious man. I think that's a lot of what's behind the whole shed your human like any pleasures that come with being a human, shed that just because of the shame I think he had. And so he's forcing that on himself, but not only on himself but his followers as well.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like there was no rhyme or reason to how they did this, because a lot of people with a cult, that people think like, oh, I'm doing this intentionally. I am intentionally doing this to get money, get some chicks, whatever. I think these guys legitimately believed
I think so too.
These things.
At first
yeah, because they like give themselves like different names, like he was Bo, she was Peep, and then like she was T and he was something else, and then she was Pig and he was Guinea, and so they'd have all these like weird
one. Yeah,
Guinea and Pig, because they're like Guinea and Pig, and then at the very end, he wouldn't go by his name, he'd go by Doe, spelled D-O, but pronounced Doe. And there wasn't ever like a reason why, but then like their beliefs would change and fluctuate, so that he would basically teach his followers that you had to be like mentally, like have mental fluidity to basically just believe anything he said the moment he said it, and you have to sever all your ties with all your friends and family and everything. So all of his followers became 100% dependent on him and Bonnie Nettles until 85 when Bonnie died, and then just on him. And so it's like reading some of the stuff he would teach, it seems like he would just pull it out of who knows where and just throw it out there as like a test and to see if his followers believed him. And at the end of it, there's like 39, 40 people that just would believe anything he said, would do anything for his approval, would do anything he asked, would wear the same clothes he'd wear. You know
what's the genius thing though is part of their belief system is that the actual act of believing them was proof that they were being inhabited by whatever second level being or whatever. And so the reason why no one believes them, or the reason why their parents or respectable people outside the group don't believe, it's simply because they haven't been inhabited, or they haven't been programmed to believe that. And so the fact that they have an inkling of belief means that they were programmed to believe, and now it is their calling to follow this guy. So it's like this kind of circular thing where just because you found it interesting and it like kind of piqued some interest, now all of a sudden that means you're programmed to follow them, and you're blessed. You're like almost a prophet yourself because you're following them. So it's like this circular thing. It's kind of a genius way to build a following, like a cult following, I think.
Yeah. Well, and it seemed like their belief system would change and kind of fluctuate every day, but it always kind of came back to there's a higher level. They didn't call it heaven; they called it a higher level. We're going to ascend to a higher level. What did you call it earlier, Giordano? Level above human. What was it again?
Yes. Evolutionary level above human. ELA.
Yeah. And they have all these like capitalized things that are like they do that cult thing where it's like they have these specific phrases that mean specific things, and so it's like repeat.
It's like programming.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and like there's one time where he told all of his followers that they had to like pick new names, but they couldn't have any vowels in it, and just weird stuff like that. But so the whole idea was ascending to a level above human, and eventually they settled on that our bodies are possessed by some sort of an interdimensional being or an alien of sorts, or a spirit alien or something, and these bodies are just containers, and you need to shed these bodies to go up into this spaceship so you can become one with these aliens that are in this spaceship flying behind this comet Hale-Bopp. and ascend to the next level above human, the evolutionary level above human. So what this, I guess we should probably just like cut right to the chase, but what this basically leads to is that in 96, I believe, like the end of 1996, they'd kind of like tried other attempts before. They lived out in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico for a while and tried to start a commune out there. It didn't work, so they stopped. They moved to Rancho Santa Fe, California. Super ritzy area. It's like a suburb of San Diego. Very nice area. They bought this massive, like 9,200 square foot house. They called it the monastery. And all these people, it's 39 people. So at this point, Bonnie Nettles has died. Marshall Applewhite is like in his 60s. He's having some health concerns. He's afraid that he might have cancer too, but he's not sure. He's also doing the normal cult thing of getting extremely paranoid because at this time, Waco has already happened. Ruby Ridge has happened. And so he's thinking the government's going to kill him. So he becomes uber paranoid as well. And
I think they started buying weapons or talked about buying weapons, like because he was on internet forums and stuff. And they were talking
that's
about
what's so crazy. Yeah, and that's what's so crazy about this is at this time they had a website, and that's part of what their revenue was. Is they had a business called Higher Source, and they would basically do like web hosting and like building websites for people in the 90s, But that's how they got a lot of their source of money. So they buy this 9,200 square foot house called the Monastery in Rancho Santa Fe. They're paying in cash every month, and they buy like alien abduction insurance. I don't know who they bought it from, but they bought it. And they all are living in there like it's commune, but they're very secretive. No one really knows what they're doing or why. They kind of like close up the windows. You can't see inside. They don't really interact with anybody else. They're all there wearing their like androgynous look with the baggy clothes and everything. In March of 1997, it's March 19th through 20th is what happened. They all have like a party or something. And then in the middle of the day, they all record on a VHS tape. They record a video of all themselves saying their final goodbyes because they're going to they're going to leave this human existence and ascend to the next level. And it doesn't really say how. I don't even know if these people at the time knew what they were going to be doing, but anyway, point being, they record a video where they're all talking to the camera, saying goodbye to their parents. Some of and it looks like it's weird because some of them are crying. They're all laughing and giddy about it. They're really excited about it. They're looking longingly and lovingly at this. They call him Doe, their leader, and they basically all record their prepared speeches in the video. They leave it there in the house, and then they all start committing basically a ritual suicide. And they all were wearing the exact same clothes, kind of these black pants, black shirt with a patch on the arm that said next level away team, right?
It was the away team, yes.
Yeah, which was a on purpose reference to Star Trek.
Right, yes.
And they all wore.
Speaking of Star Trek, he used Star Trek a lot in his recruiting.
Yeah. Apparently it was very common because he read a lot of sci-fi. He read a lot of the Bible and a lot of sci-fi. But so they're the next level away team. They had this patch. They had like the black coat, black pants, and they all wore Nike Decades, like the Nike Decades shoes. And I guess the reason why is because they got a good deal on them, but also because Doe, the leader, just really liked Nikes, and so they'd always one of their mottos was just do it instead of just do it like Nike, just do it.
Yes.
And so that is so weird. Yeah, but what they all did, and there was 39 of them, men and women. They're all adults, including Marshall Applewhite himself. They all basically ingested some like barbiturates. I think it's a luminol is what they call it, luminol, which is used to treat like seizures in kids, I think is what they use it for nowadays. But they took basically like a fatal dosage and they mixed it with like applesauce or pudding and then washed down with vodka. Then they'd lay down on this bed or on a table and put a plastic bag over their head and like cinch it around the neck. So they would just basically asphyxiate and then just die. And they did it in like 3 groups. And so what would happen is like the first group of like 10 or 15 people or whatever would commit suicide this way. Then the people that were still alive would kind of prepare their bodies, move their bodies to a table, cover it with the same purple cloth and the same manner covering the top half of the body. And they did that until the very last group committed suicide. one of the things they did before they committed suicide is they sent out all these like mailers to people. Like former members would get like a copy of the videotape. The BBC, I think, got a copy of the videotape. And that's how these people were discovered, is because one of their former members, who had been a believing member for a time and then left and was living somewhere else, I think somewhere else in like LA or something, they sent him a copy of like their final will and testament, and he watched it, and he basically like bummed a ride to Rancho Santa Fe, California, goes in the back door, which was left unlocked on purpose for him, sees all the dead bodies there, and then like 2 or 3 days later calls in an anonymous tip to the police department and basically says, hey, I think there's been a mass suicide. So that the cop gets there by himself, kicks the door open, and sees all the dead bodies on the table, just all dead. And like they come back like a day or so later with like the crime scene investigators and find out what happened. And in total, 39 people had killed themselves.
Man.
And these like people ranging from like their 20s all the way to this lady that was like in her like late 70s. So that's that. I mean, I probably skimmed over a lot of stuff. You guys may want to add some color to it, but that's basically what Heaven's Gate is. And they, the website is still going because there were 2 followers that didn't kill themselves that still apparently maintain the website to this day.
Yeah. Well, and interesting about that website is there's a bunch of links, and I think the bottom one is an invitation to join them.
Yeah.
And so it was like a timed thing where it's like, it says, if you're reading this, we're already gone. But if you call out to what are the tea and dough and basically shed your earthly existence, commit suicide, then that's like it's like calling the spaceship to you, and the spaceship will come and pick you up.
Which people did do. So it was 39 people. It was 21 women, 18 men, including Marshall Applewhite. And only the last 2 people to commit suicide still had the bags on their heads. That's how they knew they did it with bags. It's because on all the other ones, the people like took it off. But the reason I bring this up is because they released all these messages out like, hey, you can follow us too. They had like, I think 2 or 3 followers that had fallen away, that when they heard about this mass suicide, they also committed suicide in the same or similar manner. And then one guy like shot himself in the head. And then there was another guy who wasn't even affiliated with this cult at all. I'd never even heard of him. He just read about it on the news, and he committed suicide just to kind of like join them, knowing nothing about Heaven's Gate previously.
That's wild.
I didn't even know about that.
It seems like there is something powerful about the whole story, or powerful enough to affect people. I mean, it affected me when I heard it, and I had, of course, no belief in any of it necessarily, but I was so moved, I guess you could say, by the power of people who took something so seriously that they would take their own lives because that's how much they believed in it. And you could say because if you've read about Jonestown and stuff, there's other people who were tricked into it, or they did it because of drugs or overdoses or something. But this was like, they didn't do that stuff. So it just seems to be, well, these people, they had 20 years to think about it, and then they finally sat down and did it. So there's just something so striking about that.
Yeah, and the video before, it's like they're giddy about to go on to Disneyland or something like that. Right? It's like they're nervous but giddy about it. So it's like they obviously believed it.
Yeah. It wasn't like I don't know. It wasn't. They were really excited. And I think, I mean, my personal take on the whole thing is that this is, and I don't know if this is getting off on a tangent, but the one portion of the Heaven's Gate stuff that I do not think has been very much examined is the influence actually of Star Trek and of sci-fi on these people. People have talked a lot about just Heaven's Gate, whether it's a cult or a New Age religion or something. But when I was a teenager, I recall, I mean, we're all familiar with Trekkies and the phenomenon of Trekkies, of people who are like obsessed with Star Trek. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's as much of a thing today, although Star Trek is still extremely popular, but it's kind of different than it used to be. When I was in high school, I remember there was a documentary, one of the first documentaries I ever watched when I was just like a young teenager, and it was called Trekkies. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a 90s indie documentary, just this camera crew going around and filming a bunch of basically weirdos people who were obsessed with Star Trek, and there would be like regular appearing people, but they would be obsessed with Star Trek, dressing up in Star Trek uniforms. I
Speak
remember,
Klingon.
yes, right. They actually learned Klingon or Vulcan. There was like dentists who redid their entire dentist office to look like it was on the Starship Enterprise, or people who like decked out their garages and stuff. And like, this is like pre-internet, or at least very early days of the internet. So these are people who are really obsessed with this stuff.
Yeah, these are guys that like got beat up for doing this.
yeah. People who
before it was cool.
Yeah, before it was like acceptable to do this. They were like, the people on the spectrum and like fully embracing the lifestyle. And my point is that I think Star Trek especially affects people in a way people who want to believe in something, who maybe even have a Christian background, but for whatever reason, Christianity or modern Christianity just doesn't provide a lot of satisfying answers to things, whereas Star Trek provided like a real model of how people could live together and of a sort of a utopian world. And I really think
it's also flashy, like literally flashy.
yes, that's right, because you get costumes and you get like special effects and cool, and it's like there's adventure and it's exciting, and you get to go on a spaceship.
It's real and tangible.
Yes, it's real. That's the main thing is the reality, and it's tangible. And that was the, if you want to call it, theology of Heaven's Gate that would set them apart from other religious movements and other forms of Christianity, is that they believed that God and that Jesus were real physical beings, and that the alien entities that were controlling them were not just of the spirit, but that they were actual alien beings. And in fact, they said all of the stuff in the Bible about angels visiting the earth, none of that was metaphorical. That was all real. Although what we call angels were just extraterrestrial beings that lived on another distant star, which, growing up as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints, already growing up and being called a cult or being called, like an outsider religion, not part of the mainstream religion. Actually, yeah, I felt like I understood in some ways what they were talking about, like the reality of spiritual things, that they were actually real. Anyway, all of this just to say, I actually think, yeah, the influence of Star Trek can't even be overestimated. And in the book that I read, and I didn't watch all of the exit videos, but I watched some of the exit videos on YouTube. You can see that these people's videos that they formed. But there was like repeatedly quoting Star Trek or Star Trek The Next Generation. It was said in the compound they had a lot of Star Trek movies, Star Trek VHSs. One of their favorite movies was Stargate from the 90s. They loved watching The X-Files. And what was the other one? Oh, Battlestar Galactica, I heard. The old one, because from the 70s. So it's like all of this sci-fi stuff that was touching on, I don't know, matters of spiritual matters, things of deep importance, but that you wasn't, if you go to mainstream Christian stuff, they don't really address.
Well, I think, I don't know if it's this one or another one. It's almost like a Jungian thing where it's like we're only telling the stories that are in our blood, basically. And so like the Star Trek is just the next iteration of that, like because in the Bible they didn't have words for it like we do now, like, or they just used different words. Like they said when Jesus was born, a new star appeared in the sky. They say that was a UFO, and like we would say UFO, they say a new star. It's the same thing. And so it's like just things that are repeated over and over because yeah, like a Jungian just thing that is kind of beyond an individual telling the story. It's like above that.
Yes, I think that's and for some reason these are a group of people who, for whatever reason, wanted to shed earthly attachments. And I think that you were spot on with talking about if you have sexual sins or things that you feel extreme guilt and shame about, then maybe that would make sense that that's what I want to put away from myself. It's like, I want nothing to do with sexual desire, and I want to overcome that completely. And so that's what I think that it attracted people who wanted to overcome that sort of physical or bodily desire for things, and that was like their main concern of their life. And so that's why there was such a relief at the end, where they're like, well, we can finally leave, we can get rid of it and not have to worry about it anymore. And in some ways, and this is, getting into LDS doctrine, but one thing that they repeatedly taught was about when they go to the next level. Applewhite taught that next level bodies are genderless bodies. They're pleasant looking. They're eternal and they're perfect, but they don't reproduce. And I mean, not to get off on LDS beliefs and stuff, but that is not far off from what, and not just LDS, but other Christian beliefs about angels, about what life is like in paradise, is that not everyone, when you have that resurrected, perfected form, you kind of become genderless, and you're without, not genderless necessarily, but you don't reproduce, and you don't you do not marry, or you're not given in marriage.
Right.
So,
And to give these people the benefit of the doubt, it's almost like I said, the Bible had different words for what they're explaining now, and this is just more high fidelity, right? Like they're like you said, vaguely Christians believe that when you go to heaven, like I don't know if you're resurrected or whatever, but you don't really procreate. So it's like you probably that there's no sex in heaven type thing. It is a pretty general Christian thing. And so
it wouldn't be heaven then, would it?
yeah, no, you're right.
No, I'm kidding.
Um,
Sorry, I derailed the conversation.
but how they describe it is just more high fidelity. Like they're describing it like it's real, and so it makes it more sci-fi-y. And so they're pulling from the Star Treks and the Stargates and whatever, like, because that's the reference that they have at the time. So that's giving them the benefit of the doubt, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had the same thought you guys did, where it's like, it seems like, at least with Marshall Applewhite, that he's trying to overcome this cognitive dissonance. Like, hey, I've been struggling with this. I know it's wrong in my own mind. And this solution that he came up with was just what his brain came up with.
Yeah,
right?
there's like a pretty clear through line to that, I think.
Yeah. It just took a while, but he got to it. But we've been going for a while now. Should we get to the lyrics?
I guess we can talk about the actual song itself.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot of background. So, but I think that's a pretty good like intro, at least to Heaven's Gate. They've kind of fallen into obscurity, I think. I mean, I think our generation remembers them because we were alive, and maybe like our parents' generation. But the younger kids, it's like people now who know very little about 9/11. Same kind of thing. And this is even more obscure. This is way more obscure than that. So, but should you guys cool if we start going through the lyrics and just kind of pick out anything that we like? So, Giordano, since you're the guest of honor, do you want to kind of start off and we'll kind of go just sort of verse by verse?
Of course. Yeah, I have them in front of me here. Starts off, a brand new heart for your counterpart. You imagined life before they walked into the dark. And I think the singer or the narrator is just sort of explaining, he's singing about someone who's joined Heaven's Gate, and he's talking about the transformation that the person makes from when they initially joined to like fully being converted into the Heaven's Gate way. Although, a brand new heart for your counterpart, that would be like the counterpart to, I assume, to the self. So like you have your regular self, but then you have like sort of your dark side, your Heaven's Gate side.
Yeah, and I thought that was the whatever, the interdimensional whatever that when you start believing, you kind of take on a second level being type thing,
which they refer to as walk-ins. Or the concept of a walk-in, which is like an interdimensional alien that can sort of enter your body and sort of just take you over. Which again, it's like, are you guys just talking about demons here, or that's what it seems like?
Well, I thought there was also a point where he basically said, well, the soul as we understand it isn't actually a spirit, it's an alien that's just occupying your body. So when you have those like spiritual experiences, or your consciousness talking to you, that's the alien talking to you. And that's kind of what it made me think of, is like your counterpart is like, well, that's your
Right.
Your alien self.
There's also the positive side of it too, which could be the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit communicating to you, or angels trying to
Yeah. I mean,
communicate you.
that's their argument, is that the aliens inhabiting their body were the good ones, or
Yeah.
or the evolution, the next step of the evolution. If you believed and were part of this group, that means circularly that you have a evolutionary superior alien in your body.
Which I
Right,
wanted to
because
note. I had in my notes that on one of the exit videos, one of the guys actually mentions Mormonism, where he said, because he was making this exact same distinction. He was saying, a lot of people out there say that they have alien encounters. Just because you've had an alien encounter doesn't mean you necessarily had an encounter with a good alien, because there's bad ones out there. And then, as his example, he cited Joseph Smith, which he called John Smith. But he said, John Smith, the founder of the Mormon religion, yeah, he had alien encounters too, but he was, deceived by the bad aliens. So it's like they knew, like they had all of this was part of their little theology as well.
That's what I was going to say, is because Doe, Marshall Applewhite, that was one thing he talked about as well. There's good aliens and bad aliens. I'm telling you about the good ones. The bad ones are out there, and he always referred to them as Luciferian, like Luciferianism, Luciferian aliens.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's saving everyone from the bad aliens, I guess.
Yep. Just like Jesus.
Yeah, from the bad aliens.
Because he is.
That's something to keep in mind with all of this, is that he literally saw himself as Jesus. So it's like when you say like he would like tell him one thing and then change his mind and stuff. He's like the people that followed Jesus followed him, right? And so that's what he literally thought himself as a deity.
He's like, I'm allowed to do this because that's who I am. Mm-hmm. In the lyrics, that was the second line that I have, which says, "An alternate life slowly rides the line, and all it takes is watering at night." And again, that's kind of like just you live your everyday life, but then when you sort of start exploring this alternate life of the cult or the new religious movement or whatever you would like to call it, you start to sort of transform. And all it takes is watering at night. All I just assume that means is feeding it. And like at night when I don't know if it means something that happens when you're asleep or in your dreams, but something that is cultivating your beliefs and your change into this like new life and new person. The line that I found, something kind of interesting here, and this line gets repeated throughout the song. He says, "Wait to climb aboard," which reference to the spacecraft that was coming on the tail of Hale-Bopp. And then it says, "Destruction to a T." And then he rhymes that with "shattering responsibility." And when he says destruction to a T, it was not until I was getting ready for this podcast that I realized that I actually think that was a double entendre, where he's talking about destruction to a T, meaning, the phrase, but also T and Doe were the names of the two leaders, and destruction to a T was kind of like a veiled reference to T, the leader that Bonnie Nettles.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
So used my English teacher skills there.
There you go. Go to school, kids. It pays off. Look, you get on a podcast.
Big bucks, okay, that's why I make the big bucks, guys.
So yeah, awesome. I like those thoughts, Giordano. I kind of had the same sort of vibe from reading those as well. The destruction to a T. I don't know if I caught the implication of Doe and T there, but that definitely makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So should we keep going?
Yeah.
Scott, you got Okay. So it's sometimes it's easier said than done, and then the next line is, "Eternal life from earthly vacation, a burning knife won't cut you out of ice cold persuasion." Now, I read through these several times, and I'm kind of drawing a blank on a lot of them. But if you guys have any thoughts you want to call out on any of these, let me know.
This is the thing. Okay, so I was reading that book, the Heaven's Gate book, and this part like actually made me laugh out loud. So the guy goes for like 200 pages talking about Heaven's Gate and going off on critical theory and academic stuff, and then like at the very end he just tosses in this line so casually, and oh, by the way, the male members of Heaven's Gate, before they committed suicide, they went and got castrated.
Yep.
That's
right. They castrated themselves.
In Mexico City or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, that was kind of a big thing. Like maybe you should have spent more than a line on that. You spent like 20 pages on this other stuff, but they castrated themselves. And from what I read, they attempted a castration of the male members in the compound, but
It was like a
didn't go
nurse.
very
It
well.
was like one of them was a nurse that tried it.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, and it was botched, and so they like had to go to the hospital. I actually, and this is the thing, the book that I read did not give any information. I don't know. You can just walk in 1997 and just ask to be castrated, maybe in California, but
No,
you can say, okay, please.
from the thing that I read or listened to, they went to Mexico City or something to do it. So they went.
Well,
They went.
because of the botched one, they had to go to Mexico to get it done. They found a doctor in Mexico to do it.
See, I did not want. This is the thing that like I was actually terrified to be googling anything about castration, so I was like scared to. So I didn't want to
see that.
Yeah, I don't want to see it. So so that line where he says a burning knife won't cut you out of ice cold persuasion, I just took that to mean like a veiled reference to the castration part, where like even a knife is not going to cut you out of the persuasion of dough. Of tea and dough. So like you're so there that we can even put you under the knife and you'll still go along with this.
Got it. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Good call.
Yeah.
Well, it goes on. There's plenty of verses here, so we can kind of
repeat. They repeat themselves, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it goes on to you accepted the ride with the exception of life. You might find yourself in love with deception and lies.
Mm-hmm. That seems pretty like, you accepted the ride with the exception of life. It's like you'll take the ride, but you don't get to have life. So, and I don't know, it seems pretty, it's just like a poetic way of saying that, these people were willing to give up their own lives for what the narrator is basically saying deception and lies, although I don't know if that's necessarily proven. They did, it's like the guy is, I don't know if they were being necessarily, I don't know if they were being deceived by tea and dough. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
I think they believed it.
Like, I don't really believe that they went into a UFO, but I think that they believed it. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I kind of have Sorry, go.
Go ahead, Scott. No, go ahead.
I kind of have a theory a little bit that I don't necessarily think Doe believed it in the end. I think he was just trying to get out.
Oh yeah, he was just
think so.
in over his head and like, I'm done with this.
And he was like, I mean, basically living a life for a long time. He chopped off his dick. He had been. I think he figured out he'd been leading all these people to this weird thing. In the podcast that I was listening to, the daughter of T had been getting letters and stuff from her mom the whole time, which was kind of a no-no, and she was sending her money. And after T died, Doe, like a year or two later, sent her an audio message, and like they just play it for you on the podcast. And he's like super frazzled. He's not this confident dude that is leading a cult. Like he's like super. It's like he's trying to back out of it almost, but then he doubled down. And then also in one of the letters that the mom sends her, T sends the daughter, was she told her to conform to society at all costs, basically. So she's like, it's like they didn't believe it almost, but they were too deep to do anything about it.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of stuff like right when this happened, because the part of the reason why this is so notable is because the media just took this and ran with it for that whole year. This stuff was all over the news, and all kinds of people trying to shoehorn stuff. Like gay rights people were trying to say that all this was caused because of the persecution of gay people, and Marshall Applewhite was gay and he couldn't express himself as a gay man, and so that's why he did all this, is because it was a result of homophobia, basically. And other people were basically trying to say like, oh no, these guys, Doe and T, it was all lies. They knew they were lying to people, and they were just deceiving everyone on purpose just to get power or whatever. But I don't know, the more I read about it, the more I'm like, you know what? I think they at least half believed all of it, at least, or maybe just believed the whole thing. Because in the end, the guy still killed himself.
Well, I think he killed himself just out of just like he wanted to kill himself. Because he changed his theology. Like they were the two, right? At the beginning, they were from the book of Revelation, and then by the end, they were deities. I don't think. They were making it up as they went. Like at first they were pretty confident, but I don't know.
I think there's a lot to say for the castration part, because I don't know, but when you look at suicide rates of people who have of transgender post-op stuff. And like when you do that to yourself, you make that permanent alteration to your body. Now I know that there was a lot of women who committed suicide too and who didn't get castrated. But anyway, I don't know if there's some sort of link there between like, oh wow, I just did this to myself. There's no turning back, and what have I done? And like, I just have to fully embrace it, like you were kind of saying. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a connection there or not, but it wouldn't.
Or like
I was not okay, and I forgot to add this one thing. The actress Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek, who played Uhura on the original Star Trek, her brother was one who joined the cult and who was one of the 39 who committed suicide.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Like, so like that is also another Star Trek connection, which is just weird.
Yeah. Yeah. It's okay. There's so many weird things. Like the other thing is they all died with $5.75 in their pocket, a $5 bill and a roll of quarters, because they carried that with them everywhere. Yeah. Like in case they had to make a call from a payphone, and just, there's so many weird, like little,
like ritualistic little things like
that they would do.
You mentioned they were all dressed the same. And I remember one of the things when I saw the reports when I was 16 or 15 and I saw them, they all had chopped their hair off. Mm-hmm. And people were saying, I remember even at the time that they were trying to appear genderless and featureless, or like, without gender. But someone said in like a YouTube comment that I saw when I was watching the exit videos, they're like, oh, LOL, I could never join this cult because I could never give myself that Vulcan haircut. And I thought to myself, wait a second, were they actually trying to look like Vulcans, like Mr. Spock? Because like they all have the same haircut. In Star Trek,
with like the bangs going straight across.
Yeah, and that's kind of how they look. And I wondered if they had actually stumbled onto something that they didn't even realize what they were doing. But it's just
like, so like it was a subconscious thing to cut their hair like a Trek.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Because they never gave a reason for any of it, or if they had a reason, it died with them because they didn't explain.
That's wild. I hadn't thought about that, but that would definitely make sense. Is like, oh, it's genderless, but also it's kind of like Spock, so it's cool.
It's kind of like so it's okay.
And it fits with the theology, Yeah. All right. Do you want to take the next couple of verses, Scott? It starts with an unconventional mind.
Yeah, an unconventional mind was your ticket to ride. You may have found your dot in the sky. And again, that the unconventional mind is kind of referring to that they were higher beings in their particular minds because they believed, and so that was their ticket. They never heard from you. They never heard from you, and it became a concern. You were gradually conditioned with nowhere to return because they force you to cut ties, basically.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah. Although apparently there was like once or twice during this whole process where Doe was like, you know what? Call your parents. For one day, you can call your parents and just tell them that you are working on computers at a monastery. That's literally one of the excuses he told his followers to give. And so and that's kind of why they did this video in the first place, was literally a final goodbye to all their friends and family.
Yeah.
And yeah. I can't imagine.
Home on Christmas, like as a missionary. Well, at least when I spent that, you got a phone call home on Christmas and Mother's Day.
Yep. Same here.
Yeah. Same.
And lived a life of poverty. Although I would not say we were genderless, but we lived a life of celibacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I didn't castrate myself though.
But thankfully that wasn't a requirement.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You're going to need that later, so.
We'll let you keep it.
All right. Let's continue going down the lyrics.
Okay.
It's you went to climb a board, construction to a T, shattering responsibilities, and then it does the eternal life, earthly vacation, burning knife. One again.
It kind of seems like it just kind of repeats from there.
Yeah. You're right, it does. It just repeats the same lines over and over again until the end of the
song.
So
I could see, like, if you didn't know anything about Heaven's Gate, you're like, what? Okay, cool. It's just like some weird, dark synth rock or something.
Yeah, well, and you know, being a pretentious radio guy, Giordano, if you have to ask, you don't get it. So that's exactly it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you don't know about Heaven's Gate? Oh, okay.
It's called art, Scott. Look it up.
Yeah, for real. Going back to the music thing, I'm a fan of, I really like this band Porcupine Tree, and they're kind of like a prog rock band that was active in the early 2000s. They have an album called Lightbulb Sun, And there's a track on the album that I've always liked, and at the second half of that track is just like this voice of this guy talking, and he's talking about the evolutionary level above human and what it means to ascend to that level, and you have to leave behind all human attachments. And it's just like them jamming out while you hear like this recording of this guy talking. And this is like kind of the early or pre-internet days. I always just thought like, whoa, that was just some weird guy talking. I don't know who that is. And then I think one day I actually Googled it and I found a transcript. Oh, it was Marshall Applewhite from his exit video, or not his exit video, from one of his videos. They played a transcript of him talking. And one of the things he repeatedly says is, this is your last chance to leave planet Earth before it is recycled. And in fact, that's the name of the track by Porcupine Tree. Last chance to leave planet Earth before it is recycled. And so I'm like, okay, that's a bizarre, weird thing. Then, okay, so flash forward years later, listening to the demonstration by Drab Majesty. One of the tracks, they use the very peculiar word of recycled. And it says, you said you would be recycled. And they repeat that line a few times. And it just like sent off this thing in my brain. I was like, that's weird, because you don't hear the word, you said you would be recycled. That's weird. So I looked into it and I'm like, oh, this is actually an album about the freaking guys, the Heaven's Gate people. So
That's crazy.
That's how I made that weird connection.
I wonder how many songs and albums are out there that are about this freaking group, because apparently there's like they're just
right. I think there actually are. There probably are more. I'm not aware of them, but I know they're out there.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely interesting. Like it's worth like writing songs about. I think if you're gonna write a song about something like this is an interesting thing.
Why not mass suicide?
Yeah,
I agree.
Metal. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was talking about the mass castration.
Oh, okay, my bad. A little.
Yeah.
Well, and apparently, like not long after this, like Nike took off the Nike Decades off the market, and no one really knows why. And so, because of that, because of this incident, and the fact that they're not on the market anymore, Nike Decades have like a huge resale value now on the market. Like they're really hard to come by.
Amazing. I would love a pair myself after this. This is so cool. In fact, I Googled and I saw that I saw replicas of their actual patches that they had made of Heaven's Gate away team. Again, super cool design. It's like whoever they had, graphic design wise, it was doing a great job. But like, I really actually want to get one of those, or like a laptop sticker or something, because it's just so cool looking. They have a very unique sense of style.
Yeah, these people that started it, and the people they recruited, probably, while they're crazy, like they obviously have some like screw loose or something. They're geniuses. Like they have absolute insane minds. Like you talk about the one of the videos from that one song. Like they pulled some audio from one of the videos. He has like instructional videos and recruitment videos and stuff that are like 13 hours long. Like where he's literally teaching for that long. Whether he believed it or not, he obviously believed it for a long time. And so to have that much to say and that much organized, like they had it all figured out. Whatever they had figured out was complete. They had all the dots kind of put together in their own minds. And so it's like this interesting peek into like someone else's alternate reality almost in their brain. It's weird.
Because I feel like if you've ever had a conversation, or like if you've ever had to go listen to like a homeless person who is schizophrenic or something, who comes up and starts rambling to you, you can tell within about 10 seconds that like, oh, I'm talking to an insane person. And what they're saying is just sort of nonsensical ramblings. But yet this guy, but how did people, because I actually have listened, I watched some of the videos on YouTube that were posted of this guy, and although I wouldn't say it was anything like, I don't know, earth shattering, but he still had something, like he had made a complete enclosed system that he believed himself to be a part of. And so it made sense to them.
Yeah. They knew the Bible. So it's not like they were just like vaguely referencing like things that they heard about what was in the Bible. Like they knew the doctrines in the Bible, and they made it fit into their system, at least selectively. But yeah, it definitely made sense to them, and they weren't dumb. They weren't idiots.
Yeah, well, they consider this time here as like a school. Like that's what their videos would say is like, oh, we finished this class and
Yeah.
now we're going to go to graduation, which is death. And it's such a, yeah. And what's also interesting about this is cults have been around for a while. I think this is one of the first major ones to make the news where they actually actively recruited people online. It's the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
but they're still recruiting people using a website, which was very new for the time.
Yeah.
And it's just funny the website is still going and still looks exactly the same as it did.
So good. You can read a lot like that. That's where I learned a lot about their doctrines and like their actual theology, which it's fascinating that like because there are like you mentioned Giordano, like there are some some of the unique things about it are also unique about the LDS theology and in our doctrines. Like they totally missed the boat, but it's like they were close to it at one point. Like they got close to LDS.
Yeah, like they
Doctrine.
picked up on stuff that was maybe missing from every other tradition, and that's where whenever a group does that, they kind of hit close to truth or close to eternal truths that, like, if no one else is giving it, if no one else is teaching it, then like someone will eventually figure it out. I feel like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although perhaps not in the whole. I feel like cults in general were a much bigger thing in the 90s, at least for me. When I was in high school, I took a class in psychology, and I had this teacher, Mrs. Haddock, and I loved her. She was an older woman who taught this psychology class. I don't know what, I mean, I guess I can see why cults are related to psychology, but I remember she spent like half the class teaching us about cults or warning us to not join a cult. Like she was so worried about us joining cults.
Like,
And they were,
careful, they're out there.
yeah, I know. It was like there's like a huge, it's like that meme. I thought quicksand was going to be a bigger problem in my life thing.
Yeah.
And this is like for
I thought
me.
cults are going to be a bigger
I thought
problem
cults
now.
were going to be like a bigger issue. Like people are going to be actively recruiting me, and
I think they didn't realize how much the internet would just make everyone so jaded and cynical. Like
yeah,
no one
right. It had
believes
the
anything.
opposite effect. Yes.
Couldn't have foreseen it. Well, I remember that. It's funny you brought that up, Giordano, because I had the exact same thought. I was like, where are these things now? Why aren't they happening now? Because you're right. In the 90s, like it was like everyone's like fascination when you were like 15 is like, dude, you heard about this cult? They believe this, this, and this. No way. Have you heard about that one where they all drank Kool-Aid and died? You know, like
Mhm.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
that was like a fascination. And now, like, I'm sure cults exist, but you think with the internet and like with the 24/7 media cycle that we have, that we'd be hearing about this kind of stuff at least more frequently. And I never hear about things like this ever. And I haven't since the 90s.
Well,
You know, it's almost like they died out. Yeah.
now
Yeah.
the only people being called cults are us.
Yeah.
Right?
Me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Basically.
Which is why you have to embrace the cults and be like, yeah, I love cults. Cults
Yeah,
rock.
they're cool. They're
Yeah,
based.
cults are cool. They're based,
Yeah.
and
They're based.
cults have,
Based in
if anything,
Coalfield.
I feel like, online secretive online communities have, I don't know if they've taken the place of cults, but they've kind of filled that niche of like a enclosed system that only certain people can be a part of. It's kind of like been replaced with, I don't know, online stuff maybe, but
Yeah.
yeah, you don't really hear about it. Or people don't take things. Do people believe things as seriously?
Well,
I guess,
people believe. I guess you can say. Well, I don't know if I should. The branch Covidians is what they call it, right?
right, yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
We just have serious extreme beliefs, but for maybe non-religious things or political things, which get treated as religion. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 We just replaced it with something else.
Mhm.
Yeah. Or like we're really like pro Ukraine or something.
You're right. Exactly. Right. That is their religion. It is a sort of a cult in a way, but cults, they're trying to be like exclusive, and they don't like you have like they don't care whether or not you necessarily want to join. And this new cult is the opposite, and like you have to be a part of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's different in that way. But yeah.
Yeah. So we've been going for a while.
Yeah.
Scott, should we should we start to wrap it up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Do you have
think so.
like, closing thoughts or anything that you guys do, or
Yeah, well, so I was the only thing I was going to bring up, which you already brought up, Giordano, is that like there's a semi-famous person that died, that killed themselves, and it's Nichelle Nichols' brother. So Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek, her brother died in this suicide thing. You know, these 39 people killed themselves, and yeah, it's just everything about this is just kind of blows my mind, because I'm thinking, like, what would I do in this situation? Because I've been called a member of a cult my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting as a Latter-day Saint reading through what this guy teaches and go, you know what? He's touching on some nuggets of truth there,
Mm-hmm.
but they're distorted, they're skewed, right? Because he doesn't have, there's certain things he's missing, as we know. And it's amazing to me that even with a distorted version of a distorted, cloudy version of the truth, he was still able to garner some followers who sensed the truth and what these people were teaching them.
Yeah. That,
however wacky it might have been.
That a Star Trek UFO religion held more meaning for them than actual the emptiness, the desolateness of modern Protestant or modern Christian beliefs.
And not only more meaning, but enough meaning to leave your family and eventually kill yourself. Like, that's a lot of meaning. That's not just like, oh, I'm going to change what church I go to on Sundays. Like, that's a big deal.
Like, no, I'm going to castrate myself and kill myself.
Yes.
It demanded a lot of people. This is like goes to teachings that we have too, but it because it demanded a lot of people, like it won't accomplish anything unless you demand your religious beliefs. It can't accomplish anything unless you demand things of people. If you have no demands, if you're like, yeah, go ahead, get drunk, get high, sleep with a lot of people, whatever. Yeah, you can't really demand anything of them, because and everyone does that. That's nothing. That's not a religious belief. So when you say, no, you have to cast off everything of earthliness, of everything of humanity, then it's like these are people who are dedicated.
Yeah, and that's not far off to what Jesus taught in the New Testament. Like there are stories in the New Testament that he requires that almost exact same thing of people. And so I think
forsaking your family and stuff.
Well, yeah, and giving away all of your riches and all that stuff. So yeah. I mean, I think you're right in that if a religion wants to continue, they need to demand stuff of their followers.
Yeah,
and I feel like that's one of the staples of the LDS religion. Is it's to be an active member of the LDS Church, you have to give a lot of your time, your money, yourself, and so it's
by today's standards, it's demanding.
By today's standards, for sure.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Well, hey, I think it's been very informative, Giordano. We really appreciate you coming on, man. And with the last few minutes that we have, is there where can people connect with you, find you? Do you have anything that you'd like to plug on the podcast?
I will plug. You can find the fantastic debut novel, The Mambo Wizard, Breakfast is Served, available in ebook and paperback on Amazon. Forthcoming this year, hopefully. Audible will carry the audiobook, but until then, just check me out on Amazon. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, I'm Giordano Lives. Giordano_lives.
Is there a audiobook out there?
Forthcoming.
Oh, forthcoming. Well, I got to say, you definitely have a voice for radio. You should you could definitely record the audiobook with your own voice, and it would be really good.
I'll have to just
do the Italian one too, man.
Yeah, that's true. I got to translate this.
Yeah, for all your
The Mambo Wizard is actually a work of translation, which it states that in the foreword. It is actually a translation work, but yes.
So translate it again.
Retranslate to Italian,
and have Nim translate it to German.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I have all these connections. Yeah.
I'll do Portuguese.
No, perfect for the Brazilian market.
The Brazilian market, that's
Brazilian
right. Untapped.
Fantasy. Yeah. Seriously, that's just waiting.
So awesome, man. All right, well, we'll put all that and a link to all that stuff in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
But yeah, so thanks for coming on, man. That's awesome. So check out Giordano's book. Follow him on Twitter. He's also a good resource for movie reviews.
Oh yes,
and thoughts on movies.
That's my movie Autism. Check it out.
Yeah. But other than that, I think we got had a good show here to wrap it up. Scott, do you have anything else you wanted to add or throw in there?
That's it.
All right.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Well, thanks, guys. Yeah, we'll let the song play us out.
Cool. Had a blast.
But